Good evening, everyone. I'm Brett Perlman, President and CEO of the Center for Houston's Future. And on behalf of everyone at the Center, I'd like to welcome you to our annual meeting. This is a tradition that we started last year, and we're continuing this year. This year is a little bit different. What we've asked to do is we've asked a number of our partners who work with us to be part of the discussion tonight. And so I'm going to start off with a bit of review of our work at the center, some of our accomplishments, our plans for 2022. And then we're very pleased to have three of our distinguished speakers who you'll meet in a few minutes say a few words, and then we'll get into a discussion. On the next slide, if I could. As many of you know, our work is guided by our theory of change, which is our operating model for how we work at the center. And the idea that we have is to bring together business, government, and community stakeholders to engage in fact-based strategic planning and collaboration and action on issues of great importance to the Houston region. And we do that in three ways: through our strategic initiatives, through community engagement, and through our leadership program. We're privileged to have the support of a wonderful board of directors, and I'd like to thank them for their hard work and contributions. Special thanks to our outgoing board chair, Astley Blair, for his years of leadership. Astley has been a great mentor and friend over the last couple of years, and I've really enjoyed working with him. We're pleased that Astley is going to continue to serve on our board, and we're also pleased that Andy Steinhubel, who you'll hear from in a few minutes, is going to take over as chair of the board this year. Andy has been a board member for 4 years. He's been an active supporter of the Center for Houston's Future in the community, and has been deeply engaged in our energy transition work. I'd also like to welcome two new directors. Bruce Mann from the Port of Houston has demonstrated over many years his dedication to the center and served as a board representative of the alumni committee, and now he's transitioning to regular board service. And Janice Weinard, who is CEO of Ladera Consulting Group, is joining the board as a representative of the alumni, the Leadership Alumni Committee. I welcome both Bruce and Janice, and am very grateful to all our board for the work they do, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you in 2022. We're also grateful to our ongoing sponsors and supporters who have remained steadfast in challenging times. I'd like to thank our corporate visionaries, Greater Houston Partnership, HCA, Houston Healthcare, Merrick, and Shell. Our catalysts include B3 Consulting, Chevron, DeMontron Automotive, and Wells Fargo. And I'd like to thank our foundation and community sponsors, Ford.us, the Energy Foundation, and the MD Anderson Foundation. We're also grateful for individuals who continue to support the center as Founders Circle donors. These donors provided leadership during our 20th anniversary campaign last year, and they're continuing in this important effort. Our board members and leadership forum graduates also continue to step up with individual gifts. And these gifts are even more crucial to the center, as we're unable, as of yet, to have major in-person fundraisers, which have been in the past a significant part of our fundraising. So if you're inspired to help support our work in the coming year, please consider making a donation at the link in the chat. Before we move ahead, I'd like to touch on a few of our accomplishments in 2021. We'll cover our three strategic initiatives, talk a little bit about the leadership forum, and our community engagement and thought leadership work. I'll start with our immigration work, which focuses on the economic importance of immigrants and immigration to our region's economy. And last year, as you can see, we released an update to our groundbreaking 2019 immigration report. We highlighted the immigration videos of our partner, Rational Middle, which can be found at their website, rationalmiddle.com. And we held three major immigration events: a national policy expert workshop with the Center for the United States and Mexico at the Baker Institute, a virtual policy summit with the Baker Institute and the George W. Bush Institute, And we put together an event for the Young Presidents Organization. In health and health equity, we worked with UT Public Health as our core partner, developing a grant proposal for a health equity innovation cluster and building a coalition consisting of over 30 organizations to support that work. And then along with UT Public Health, we submitted a grant proposal to the Department of Commerce to start developing that health equity cluster. And then finally, we kicked off the first of a series of roundtables with the theme of catalyzing innovative solutions and business community engagement in healthcare. The first focused on the intersection of maternal health and social determinants of health. And I think you'll hear a little bit more about that work in a few minutes. Moving to climate and energy, we released 2 white papers on carbon capture, utilization, storage, and hydrogen with the University of Houston. We began collaborating with the Greater Houston Partnership on the Houston Energy Transition Initiative, a strategic regional blueprint for leading the global energy transition to a low carbon energy world. And this included work in co-hosting a 3-day conference with GHP and creating the beginnings of a clean hydrogen roadmap. Along with the University of Houston, we submitted a grant proposal to the Department of Commerce to develop a regional clean hydrogen hub, which included 60 letters of support from a wide range of organizations across the community. We convened more than 150 stakeholders to begin to work together to build a blueprint for what we're calling H2 Houston Hub, which is our regional clean hydrogen hub. And we worked on a deliberative poll with Stanford University in California, Ford, showing how to educate the general public about climate change. And then finally, we completed and released a major research report for the statewide nonprofit Texas 2036 on the impact of oil prices on the state's budget. So we had a very active year in energy and climate. Moving to our leadership program, we held 2 successful leadership forums in a virtual format that drew a diverse class of participants to hear a high-level set of speakers, such as Houston Police Chief Troy Finner, President of Prairie View A&M, Dr. Ruth Simmons, and Harris County Commissioner Adrian Garcia. If you're interested in the leadership forum, please reach out to Russell Richard. We're starting recruiting for the next forum, and I'm sure we're going to have an extremely interesting group of speakers this year as well. We also held an in-person alumni reunion, and we sustained in our increased alumni engagement through our alumni committee, which, among other things, put on webcasts and events programmed by and for the graduates. And lastly, as part of our community engagement and thought leader effort, we appeared in various media outlets at the local, state, and national level over 50 times. We produced 7 webcasts with a nationally known set of speakers, including climatologist Catherine Hayhoe, Tufts University's and the Baker Institute's Amy Jaffe, Harvard Business School's Rebecca Henderson, and Hewlett Packard Enterprises CEO Antonio Neri. And finally, we participated in more than 25 events such as webcasts, panels, and conferences. As you can see, we were very busy, and a lot of our work was recognized in 2021. Here's a sample of headlines in local and national newspapers and trade publications, and we're hoping for the same level of support this year. So as you think about, as we start to think about the future of our region, I have come back to this quote several times by Peter Drucker, that the best way to predict the future is to create it. And so this is the guiding principle for the center's work as we start to partner with members of our community in 2022. This theme of partnership has become increasingly important, and you'll see in a second, partnerships are playing a key role in our strategic initiatives in very specific ways this year. And this slide shows a little bit about some of our plans for 2022. We'll focus on building a broad-based coalition to support a submission for a hydrogen hub to the Department of Energy's $9.5 billion hydrogen program. We'll expand our energy transition work with a new project on decarbonization of the petrochemical industry. And we're doing a really interesting project with the Children's Museum to educate elementary and middle school kids on climate and energy. That will result in a program on April 9th, which I would love to have as many of you who are on the webcast involved in at the Children's Museum, which will be a presentation of all the work the kids have done over this year. In health and health equity, we're continuing to work with UT Public Health to refine and seek funding for our health equity innovation cluster. We're continuing to explore pressing healthcare issues such as maternal health and mental health as ways of getting the business community engaged in making meaningful change in healthcare. And we'll be releasing an update to the 2020 healthcare report that released, which has become the foundation of our work. And then finally, in immigration, this year, we'll continue to focus on guiding business and community leaders to a greater understanding of how immigration is key to the region's economic future by working with our partners at the Baker Institute, the George W. Bush Institute, Rational Middle, and other local, national, and state organizations. In our leadership work, we're going to continue widening the circle business and civic leadership as part of our core activities. The Leadership Forum and our Alumni Committee will focus on inclusive leadership by broadening the diversity of participants and speakers. We'll also continue our efforts at increasing alumni engagement with the center. So as you can see, we have a busy year planned, and we're very excited to kick off the year by having a discussion with several of our esteemed colleagues that we've been working with over the year. And so to do that, I'd like to first introduce our new chairman, Andy Steinhubel, who became involved with the center as a partner at KPMG and really has been a steadfast supporter of our work on energy and understanding the economic drivers of the Houston's economy. So Andy, if you would join us, he's been involved with our work at University of Houston, and I've asked him to introduce our panelists. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Brett. Can you see me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, great. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to offer some perspectives, my perspectives on the importance of collaboration within the center, and then also to introduce the panel. So as Brett mentioned, I had the opportunity to work with the center on a pro bono basis for about a year, and that followed with 4 years of serving on the board. And during that time, my appreciation for the center's approach to shaping the future of Houston and the best possible, striving to shape the best possible future for Houston has really grown on me. And central to that approach is the notion of collaboration, whether it be convening or otherwise aligning with leaders in the greater Houston area and leading institutions in the greater Houston area around areas of mutual interest. And by doing so, I've seen the center create what I would call a force multiplier. So the ability to identify and refine the best ideas and work with the best people and the best institutions towards that end of shaping the best possible Houston future. And as Brett also mentioned, I've had a great personal experience doing that, working with U of H around the energy transition. We took the lead on a hydrogen sub-initiative, but it was part of an overall and broader effort that U of H orchestrated, which included carbon capture, usage and storage, the future of the grid and more renewables, and the circular economy and plastics. And I had the opportunity to work with leaders across U of H, not just in energy, but the business school and elsewhere, and share ideas on how to approach problems with the uncertainties represented by the energy industry and thinking 50 years out, 2050 and beyond, and the uncertainties around the technologies and the markets and the regulatory schemes involved, and just trading ideas on that, being challenged on the specifics of the hydrogen vision, and then also landing it in terms of specific tactical to-dos. So just a wonderful experience, and our ability to go further, faster, and get the ideas communicated through that collaboration, and in turn, all the constituents that we in U of H were able to draw into that was a very powerful experience for me, and that collaboration continues. So I'm a strong proponent of the value of collaboration of the center, and it's a critical dimension to how we go about affecting positive change in the area. So if I turn to the panel, which is my pleasure to introduce the panel, which is composed of experts in each of their respective fields, as well as senior leaders of their institutions who collaborated with the center in some form, which they'll explain here momentarily. They'll each give a thumbnail of their views of the topic area, and then reflect a bit on their experience with the center, which I really like the idea of, because it'll give another lens on the center other than us talking about ourselves. Always, I think, powerful to get some other voices and see how others see. As I mentioned, they'll speak to their area individually, and then we'll have a cross-panel discussion, which Brett will orchestrate. And during that time, you're welcome to log questions into the chat, and then Brett will come back and orchestrate a Q&A with the panelists. So with that as background, I'd like to introduce the individual panelists, starting with Dr. Tony Payan. Tony is the director of the Center for the United States and Mexico at the Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. Tony is also a fellow for Mexican Studies. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Ramanan Krishnamurti. Ramanan was one of the key collaborators that I referred to in my earlier comments with U of H. He serves as the head of UH Energy and the chief energy officer at the University of Houston. He's also a professor of chemical and biomolecular engineering within petroleum engineering. And then thirdly, I'd like to introduce Srila Sharma. Srila is a professor of epidemiology at the University of Texas School of Public Health in Houston, and she's also the co-founder of the national nonprofit Brighter Lights. Pleasure to have all of you with us this evening, and I look forward to your discussion. Thank you. Tony, if you would take the lead, please, with your comments, and then we'll follow with Ramanan and Srila.
Great, thank you, Andy. Let me thank you and the board and all the members of the Center for Houston's Future for the invitation. Of course, I want to thank particularly Brett and Laura and all the team that has worked with us so closely for the last 3.5 years. We're just doing a recount of the number of years that we've been working together. I've been at the Baker Institute for nearly 10 years now, leading the Center for the U.S. and Mexico. And one of the items on the portfolio of the center is immigration. In fact, I think 10 years ago, when I first got to the Baker Institute, immigration was not really a part of the research agenda at the Institute. There have been, of course, efforts. I think Erica de la Garza worked quite a bit on that, and I'm sure that Brett knows Erica quite well. But it wasn't really a structured issue. Immigration was a kind of a sideline research agenda. And so when I came in, because my background is on border studies, cross-border flows, and issues like that, I took up the agenda, and I immediately found in Houston great partners, not the least of which is, of course, the Center for Houston's Future. So for 3.5 years, we're laying out an agenda, interacting with industry in Houston, and trying to understand how Houston is really a paragon, a great example of the kind of good that immigration can do for the United States. So let me lay out some of the things that we've been working on. Brett mentioned some of the events that we had with the Bush Institute, the Baker Institute, the Center for Houston's Future. We've also participated in several of the workshops. And of course, the Center for Houston's Future has been to the Baker Institute as well. We've had several events over those years. We've explored many nooks and crannies. And I think we share the idea that immigration is important, not only for the United States, but also for Texas and for Houston in particular. In fact, I think that often the immigration debate boils down, or it seems to boil down to two different visions of America. One that is nostalgic about what the United States should be, ought to be. We've seen that in the 1990s literature by Samuel Huntington, the undoing of America and the browning of America. And there's all kinds of images like that. And then there's another part of the debate which says, look, we are experiencing enormous demographic shifts in the United States. The European descendant population is not really keeping up with growth. It's not with replacement levels. And it's really immigrants who are revitalizing not just the birth rate in the United States, but also the economy. They come in, they're workers, they're taxpayers, they're participating, they're contributing to the industry, they're contributing to our social security. So there are many different dimensions in which they contribute. And I think that both of these arguments, I think, have their points. But at the end of the day, I think that our vision of America is one of a melting pot, a place where everybody can come. And if they have talent, if they have something to contribute, they can certainly do so. And I think that the contribution to demography, I think, is one of the most important things that we have today. And I want to say that Houston in particular is a great example of an enormously diverse city. I would say that the most economically dynamic states and cities in the country are cities that are characterized by immigration. Houston is one of them. Texas is one of them. California, Florida, New York, almost every state that is rich and vibrant and contributing greatly to the American economy is characterized by immigration. And every city, like Chicago and New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco and Atlanta and Dallas and Houston, of course, are cities that are characterized by immigration. So clearly there is something that migrants bring with them. And I think we have discovered it together. We work together on that. One of the items that we have pending on the agenda, we've been working on that, but it's still something that we have to push, is of course, labor markets. And we have seen with the pandemic how the economy begins to recover. And then all of a sudden, all these different industries, agriculture, food processing, food services, accommodations and hospitality, construction, manufacturing, home care, elderly care, and all, even medicine, all really are populated by immigrants that have a lot to contribute, and they really are important to this enormous debate. So I want to conclude by saying that there is a debate, there's a political debate in Congress. We are gridlocked. We don't know where Congress is going. It's been very difficult. Congress has not moved on immigration since 1986, and then a little bit in 1996 to kind of restrict the immigration system. And we've been for 25, 26, 27 years in a gridlock between these two great debates, whether what's the face of America, what kind of America we want, and then of course, what immigrants can contribute. And there's some obstacles to that. People put on the table the issue of border security. They put in the table of the 11 million undocumented immigrants in the United States, what to do with them. And there's all kinds of political debate. And this is, I think, where the Center for Houston's Future and my center find commonality, because we know and we understand and we appreciate what immigrants have done for this country, the contributions that they make in this country, from demography to the economy, to the tax base, to growth and the greatness of the United States. I think we have taken it upon ourselves to create the networks, the research, and push clearly our public policy community at the state level, at the city level, but also at the federal level, to see if we can manage to get them to understand what we already see, what we already know. I'm looking forward to a good debate on this issue. Thank you, Brett, for the invitation, and thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you.
Tony, thanks so much for your comments. I'm going to turn it over to Ramanan and let him comment a little bit on the work we're doing on energy. with University of Houston.
Hey, Brett, thank you so much. And thank you and Andy for sort of giving a great introduction to the work that we've already done with you and for all the great things I think that we can do for the city and the region and the state and the country as we advance the energy transition. Clearly, the energy transition is upon us. Climate change has had a significant impact on our development, and fossil energy and the anthropogenic sources of greenhouse gases and their impact on climate change are unquestionable. And I think starting from that viewpoint, ultimately human development requires all of us to have affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy. And I think that's really what the energy transition is all about. And the work that we started in 2020, where we worked with a group of really energetic students from across the university, having great leaders such as Brett, my colleagues Greg Bean, Chuck McConnell, and Andy work with them. We sort of put the tenets around, what would it take for Houston to be the clean energy sort of leader in the world by really developing a roadmap in 4 areas. And the 4 areas sort of had timeline roadmaps that went from the next 5 to 10 years to the next 20 years to the next 30 years. And these were on 4 really important topics. The first one is carbon management. How do we really look at the issue of greenhouse gases of CO2 and methane? And how do we start to account for it? How do we start to mitigate it? How do we start to really put together an ecosystem that is not just going to talk the talk, but will actually walk the walk? A second part of this was really, we recognized very early on that hydrogen was going to be a big player in advancing the energy transition. And we recognized that Houston is the world leader in hydrogen production, hydrogen use, and hydrogen infrastructure. And how do we take advantage of it to really provide a global leadership position that could be reproduced now in places such as Singapore, Shanghai, Rotterdam, Qatar, or London. And so that was a place where Andy's work really, and Andy's leadership really helped us define that project and define that roadmap. And we'll come back to that in a couple of minutes, because I think that really has catapulted us to a position where we can really put Houston back on that energy map with hydrogen. The third one was about electrical reliability and the electrical grid system. We all saw what happened during last February. I don't need to remind any of you, especially on a day like today when it's getting colder, we all have that nightmare as to what Winter Storm Uri did to all of us. And that was a failure of our grid. We believe that with the growth of electricity, the growth of renewables, our electrical grid has to be 2 times as large by 2035 and 3 times as large by 2050. How do we get this to be reliable? That was the key issue that we took up. This is Brett's expertise, his background from EPRI, his whole knowledge base really provided us an incredible foundation to put together a study that I think is definitional. And the last one, and this really gets to the downstream side of Houston's economy, was on circular plastics. How do we advance circular plastics and make something that could transform not just the city, but start to provide a global map as to how to lead this? I think that work has really, those 4 pillars have really determined where the last couple of years, as the city has picked up the work on the energy transition, it's really catapulted what we've done. A group of 14 companies that have put together a Gulf Coast carbon capture sequestration program. They use that roadmap that we developed for CCUS to really advance it. And I think that's the kind of leadership that Center for Houston's Future and our collaborators have been able to put together. I think the next part of it is really where this Department of Commerce effort came through with looking to create a hydrogen hub. One of 4 hydrogen hubs in the country must happen along the Gulf Coast, and Houston is uniquely placed to do it. The goal, as Brett puts it, is to get to $1 a dollar for a kilogram of hydrogen. That's roughly $4 per gallon of gasoline. That's the energy content. It can be done. We know how to do it. Houston knows how to do it. But in partnership with CHF, all the universities in this greater Houston region, we pulled together an incredible consortium of over 60 people, 60 entities that came together that said, we're going to address hydrogen from cradle to grave. But along with that, address two of the most critical challenges. One, how do we ensure equity? How do we reverse issues about environmental injustices that have happened? The second, really bring in the workforce side to advance it. We've got the talent. We can't lose that talent. We are awfully close to losing that talent if we don't do something with the energy transition. The federal agencies have put money behind it. I think there is an opportunity for Houston to lead, but it's going to take leadership from more than just the Center for Houston's Future and our collaborators. It's going to take the city's leadership. It's going to take the state's leadership to really drive it. And this is where I think, looking at the kind of stuff that Tony's done with the Rational Middle, being able to turn around and say, we have the opportunity to be leaders. We've got all the pieces in place. We've got a catalyst such as the Center for Houston's Future to drive it. We can advance the clean energy future. But ultimately, I think it comes back and it behooves us to really put front and center, how do we continue to address clean, affordable, reliable energy while making sure that we don't perpetrate the past issues of environmental injustice and energy inequity. And I think this is where we've got an incredible opportunity to advance it. And I look forward to the discussion. I think there's a lot of overlap with what Dr. Sharma is going to say, and Tony, you already laid out. So thank you.
Thanks, Ramana. That was really great. Srila, do you want to talk a little bit about your work and some of the things we've been working on together?
Sure. Thanks, Brett. And it's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation to join this panel and speak with our esteemed colleagues here. I am a behavioral epidemiologist by training. And I think, one of the pieces that I've heard our two other panelists speak here is that essentially immigration, climate change are all important to the economy. And we also know that health is tied to the economy. And that's where probably a lot of my work comes in. We know that we need a healthy workforce to have a healthy economy. And Houston has a paradox of plenty. We have significant medical resources, but not enough focus on community health. And we are home to the largest medical center in the world. But we live in a community with some of the largest disparities when it comes to health outcomes and higher mortality rates that unfortunately affect, disproportionately impact people of color. This has been, as we know, further highlighted in the pandemic. And we now know that the situation is unsustainable. And paradoxically, while we are currently flowing through this unsustainable situation, the pandemic has also shown us the way forward because it has disrupted our traditional means for providing health services. And so we have an opportunity to also create new models for health service delivery. And we are one of the most innovative cities in the country. We have some of the biggest talent, whether we're talking about technology or healthcare. But it is important to also understand we also live in an area that has the highest rate of medically uninsured, which means we have the greatest need for health improvement. And again, tying it back to having a productive workforce, making this the prime area for innovation. And that's where our collaboration with the center comes in, where we put together what we feel is a very compelling proposal to build a health equity innovation cluster. And backed by I think we have about 40 organizations that are committed to be part of this cluster. that will grow the economy and increase its resilience by improving the health and the productivity of our population, primarily by training and employing a workforce that is productive and that really helps catalyze our public health and our health industry. So ultimately, we can serve our patients in a coordinated manner with a trained, efficient, and sufficient workforce. So some of the ideas as part of the health equity innovation cluster that we've sort of collaborated on and built a proposal around is further leveraging on neighborhood health hubs, augmenting telehealth delivery for primary care, chronic care, mental health, social services, and really building a layer of infrastructure and intelligence using state-of-the-art technology that we know Houston has to help scale and disseminate all of the services in our community. And then really building also on the human capacity through community health workers in our region to make sure that we're meeting people where they are, because ultimately that is the solution that we need to meet our community where they are and meet the needs of our community on where they need us to be. So we're very excited about this particular collaboration and look forward to having further conversations and building on it.
Well, thank each of you for your comments and also for your friendship and your partnership and all the work that you all do in the community. It's really been a pleasure and awe-inspiring to see what you all have done. I'm going to start a discussion, but I wanted also, and I see we already have a few comments in the chat. Feel free to join the conversation. We have maybe about 20 minutes, and I'll try to leave at least I'll do about 10 minutes and leave 10 minutes for questions from the audience. But just to get us started, one of the things I'm fond of quoting our friend and colleague Stephen Kleinberg, who talks regularly about Houston as the model for what the United States might look like. We're a large community, we're a diverse community, we have a lot of resources, but we have these issues with health equity, we have issues with climate, we have issues with inclusivity. If you were to, if we were all to wake up kind of in the Rumpelstiltskin way of going to sleep and then waking up in 20 or 30 years, and we were coming back to Houston, what would you want to see the vision in each of your areas for Houston to look like? What's your vision of what Houston might become, in 2030, 2040, or 2050? Who wants to start?
I'll go with it, Brett. And that I think if I were to sort of be Rumpelstiltskin and wake up in 2050, I'd want to see Houston continue to be the leader in energy, but now with clean energy, where we've addressed issues of carbon, where we are no longer seen as the cause of many of the greenhouse gas challenges. We've got a clean energy system that is affordable, reliable, and sustainable that now addresses people's needs so that we don't have cancer clusters and clusters of places where you've got people with significant health disparities caused by environmental pollution. We've got all of our Superfund sites removed and been mitigated. I think that, and we have a workforce that is eager, that is able, and instead of people going and moving to California or New York, they want to come to Houston, right? And that's the future I think we should have. We address issues of health disparities, environmental challenges, and be that melting pot. Talent to be that leader must come from the global leadership that is present, that is looking to solve these challenges. We can't just be navel gazing and trying to look internal. We must look to be world leaders, and that therefore require to bring worldwide talent here.
Fantastic. Tony or Srila? Thoughts?
Yeah, I'll go next. Look, I wish that as over the last few years, Brett, we've seen what immigration does. We've appreciated that the idea that immigration is dynamic, that it injects a certain sense of creativity and energy to a society, to the economy, and such. And so I think that one of the things that is pending for Houston is to understand that if we educate immigrants, if we integrate immigrants, if we provide healthcare for immigrants, if we create an environment that is welcoming and that magnifies the talents that immigrants have, we're going to all be better off. I think that's one of the things that we need to convey to people, that there needs to be a reappreciation, a review, a revalorization of what immigrants do. They're not just workers who come in and they're going to do the difficult work of flipping burgers and mowing the lawns and this kind of heavy work. No, immigrants are everywhere. I mean, in the entire, and we see it like Dr. Sharma mentioned. We see them as cardiologists and oncologists at the medical center, and then we see them cleaning the hallways at the Baker Institute, and we see them, gardening, and we see them in our restaurants serving food and cleaning tables. They're everywhere. So we have to redimension what immigrants are and the value of immigrants, and then provide systematically in different levels, like I said, education, the environment, and healthcare for immigrants. Because at the end of the day, those are the people in our community, and that's what's going to make our community great. We've seen it. I study Mexico, and when you look south, when you look to Mexico, I tell them, look, if you want a society where there's very little mobility for a huge amount of individuals who have no access to healthcare, no access to education, no access to infrastructure, who are poorly integrated into the economy, who work in the informal sector, and on, all you have to do is look south. And that drags Mexico back. Well, Houston is going to be dragged back. It's going to be behind other cities if we don't do the work that we need to do and revalue the role that immigration. That's a really important issue that I think it's pending in Houston. Finally, obviously, you and I understand that. How can we make our political class understand that? And then do the right thing when it comes to legislation, when it comes to normativity or regulation, the regulatory apparatus, to sort of take the right actions to do just that. I think if immigrants are integrated in every single system in the city, the social system, the economic system, the healthcare system, and on, all of us are going to be better off, and the entire community will be better off. We just, we seem to hit a brick wall every single time we meet with Congress members and the Texas delegation in Austin and Washington and everywhere, but we need to keep pushing at that, because I think that really is the inevitable, it should be the inevitable future. Thank you.
Great. Srila, we had our friend Catherine Parrott ask about what access to healthcare is going to look like in 50 years. So maybe you can talk about your vision for what health equity might look like, and maybe talk a little bit about that access question as well.
Sure. My vision is simple. If I were to wake up and have my way, then I would love for us to be in a world where we are not just surviving, we are thriving. And that is the challenge that we have with the lack of equity for basic needs. We live in a country where we have more than what we know what to do with, whether it's food or housing, but it's not equitably accessible for all. And that is the challenge. And having economic stability at the foundation of it is what creates these inequities. 1 out of 11 children in the US live in the state of Texas. So what happens in Texas matters to the rest of the country. However, 1 out of 10 children, 2 out of 10 children in Houston go to bed hungry every night. That is in a country where about 40 billion pounds of fresh produce goes to waste every year. It dies on the landfill. talking about climate change, here we have 40 billion pounds of fresh fruits and vegetables that just are left to die on the landfill, creating a food insecure community. So we have these inequities, and that's not because of individual choice, that's because of the environments that our families live in and the systems that are not aligned to create an equitable scenario. And until we meet our basic needs, what we call social determinants of health, which include food insecurity, transportation, housing, and access to quality healthcare. These are all basic needs because we need those not just to live, but to live a healthy life. We're not going to be able to address some of the more complex issues in establishing a stable economy. And so to me, that it's foundational that we try to think about, well, what are the sustainable solutions? What are the systems alignment, the care, the coordination, the capacity building that we need to really help move us towards more of a region where everybody has access, not just a few. And I'll just say the last thing, that really always to this day is surprising to me is how in Houston, you go 5 miles southwest to Sunnyside, the average life expectancy is about 66 years. But you go to Bel Air, which is just west of the medical center, the life expectancy is 87 years. So that's over a 20-year difference in life expectancy just based on the zip code within our very own city. And that has nothing to do with genetics and everything to do with equitable access to basic needs. So that is what I would love to see us move towards, and addressing those basic need issues.
Very nice. We're getting lots of great questions, and I'm going to get to ask one more question and get to some of the questions, and I'll try to integrate them maybe into some of the things that we're talking about. One of the things that's interesting is the intersection between some of these issues. We talk about essential workers and health, right? We talk about climate and health, right? Those things are related. We talk about, immigration and climate risk. I mean, these all issues are really all interconnected in some ways. And so I guess I wanted to ask each of you, now that you've, we're having this discussion, you've heard these different perspectives. What are some of the things that you guys see as connecting some of these issues, and where are the intersections and that we could be looking at in some of the work we're doing at the center?
Well, I can just say that in listening to the my colleagues here, we know that the pandemic is a result of climate change, and this is not going to be our last health crisis, which is resulted from climate change. We are going to likely see pandemics and epidemics, just, from an epidemiologist's point of view. That is the part that keeps me up at night, is the impact of climate change on health is just, we're just starting to see it, and it's only going to accelerate if we don't do something. And we know that when you have these very large upheavals like a pandemic, it's going to result in a financial crisis, right? An economic meltdown that we've experienced. And that does lead to human migration, and that does lead to connect to immigration. And so all of these pieces are very closely tied to each other. One of the key challenges that we are most concerned about is also mental health. That is going to be our biggest challenge in this coming year, and probably for the next 5 years. And we are not prepared to address these issues. We were caught flat-footed by the pandemic because our public health infrastructure is weak. We haven't invested in it. We have a weak workforce. Now we have an unhealthy workforce. And those are basic investments in terms of building our infrastructure that we need to really think about, not just for right now, but for the future as well. And the pandemic only brought to surface what has already, many of us were already aware of. It just, a big spotlight was shined on it. The question is, where do we go with it from here? Right? Are we going to learn from these challenges that have been brought forth predominantly because of climate change, right? Or are we going to do more of the same? Because more of the same is not going to give us different results. We've all been functioning in what we call these silos of excellence. And now we great work, but we're all in silos. But the real opportunity is, how can we collaborate and align and come together to really see these linkages? Climate change, yes, it is linked to the pandemic, which is linked to financial instability, which is linked to human migration. It's all cyclical and connected. So I'd like, those are the opportunities, they're the challenges, but that's also where the opportunity lies, to really collaborate and think about how do we come together. So that's the opportunity.
Yeah, I think I want to add to what Dr. Sharma was saying. I think, Brett, one of the things that is a problem, that I think it's a kind of a common base problem to all the different issues, whether it's energy, whether it's health, whether it's social integration, immigration, and such, is really policy failure. Our political class has been engaged in this cat fighting among them. And they really just can't sit down. They don't seem to be able to sit down at the table and say, okay, what's your baseline? What's my baseline? Is there any bracket that can bridge the two? Is there anything that we coincide in, that we could at least do that? And then later we can figure out the portions that you want, that I don't want, and such. They don't have that ability, that dialogue. Now, let me tell you, I think the Biden administration had correctly, I think, identified what is missing in America. And again, it's going to be a failure. And we just saw the Build Back Better bill essentially fail. But that included integration into the communications network, especially the internet. Everybody needs access to the internet, rich, poor, middle class, workers, non-workers, everybody needs to be connected at some level. That was supposed to invest heavily on that. We need to rebuild our physical infrastructure. That needs to be invested in, because that integrates everybody. A bad bridge, a bad road affect the worker, affect the companies, affect the distributors, affect everyone. And we see it when the infrastructure deteriorates. And we saw that there was a big investment in healthcare and vaccinations and things like that was supposed to happen as well. And there was also, what they call human infrastructure, which is education, which is knowledge, and so on. So I think what is common to all this is that our political class is failing. They're too engaged in these narrow visions of what America should be, who belongs, who doesn't belong, who should be excluded, what are the values that everybody should adhere to or not adhere to, and they're missing the big picture, that they need to do practical problem solution policies that will integrate everyone. And we just saw another great opportunity under the Biden administration that just failed. Just yesterday we saw these debates in Congress fail, and it was very unfortunate, because I think it was the right idea. Thank you.
And Tony, just to sort of amplify what you just said, I think you identified exactly the issues, and we can extend this to every aspect of everything that we do, whether it's infrastructure, energy, healthcare. And I think fundamentally we need to start changing the dialogue from sick care to healthcare. Right. And I think that has got to be the transformation. We've got to start looking at immigration as what is the benefit of it, not just that we keep knocking it down. Likewise, we try to pick solutions for energy when the real issue, the real thing that people care about is, can you provide me sustainable energy that is both affordable and reliable? Because you don't give me that, everything else goes out the window. So that trilemma is central to every one of these issues, and it takes leadership. And this is where I've got to give Brett and Andy great credit, right? To bring three of us in three completely disparate parts of the world of Houston, come and talk about the issues that are front and center to Houston. Think about Houston as an ecosystem. Let's start to solve the problems. And I think this is a start. I think we need to find ways to break down these barriers, break down these silos in which we all exist, these silos of excellence, as Dr. Sharma put it, and really integrate and solve society's problems in a practical and meaningful way, in a time that matters to people, not over the next 100 years.
This is really interesting, Brett, if I may
Yeah.
add one sentence here.
Yeah.
This panel is interesting as I hear, because you have somebody who's in healthcare, you have somebody who's an engineer, and then you have a political scientist, policy expert who's me. I mean, this is the kind of dialogue that we absolutely need, the multidisciplinary dialogue, because we can see the very many different aspects of the prism. And then your question was very challenging, because what links all these failures together?
Yeah, well, I think you mentioned it, looking at those commonalities, the common themes, whether they're political, whether it's, I think Ramanan talked about changing the dialogue. Those are all things that we're trying to do at the center. We're trying to have a new dialogue on immigration. We're trying to think about healthcare in a different way. We're trying to think about energy and not the loss, but the benefit of climate change. How do we create this as a growth engine, not as something we're losing? So we just have a few minutes. Actually, we're almost out of time. So I'm just going to give you guys one last go round. And, if you could do, and we talked about these common themes, and if you could do one thing, whether it's something in the political realm or something in the business realm, if there's one action we could take to start moving the ball on all these issues, what would it be?
I want to start first, because I think as we have talked about immigration and labor markets and quality of life, let me go to one point that we haven't yet talked about. It's been referred to, but not explicitly, and that is the interaction with mental health. There's been great research done today on the mental health of immigrants. Immigrants experience higher levels of stress than permanent residents and citizens. It is very stressful to be a migrant in this country, and especially an undocumented migrant. So if I could change something, is the status of those 11 million. Their lives would improve, their health would improve, their communities would improve, their families would be under much less stress. They could go out. And then the one thing is they could also get a better education, get a better job, better paid jobs, and climb into the middle class ladder. I think that legal status would be an incredible change for the lives of millions of families, not just 11 million undocumented residents. Many of them live in mixed status families. And that means they're impacting more than just 11 million people. They're impacting all their households, whether legal or not.
Great. Srila or Ramanan, what would be your one thing you'd
Sure.
like to accomplish? Go ahead, Srila.
Okay, well, I would say that something that is very near and dear to my heart is really building community voice and community advocacy. Ultimately, that's who we are serving, right? We're only as strong as our most vulnerable. And so really, how do we co-create our solutions, not just with the community, not just for the community? And so really building that community voice and community strategies in everything that we do, so that we're all walking the walk together. That's what I'd like to see.
Great. And Ramanan?
I've got three things, and it's inclusion. Right?
Okay, here we go.
And we've got to start having an inclusive conversation, inclusive solutions. For far too long, we've been on the divisive route, and that's got to change.
Well, this has been just an amazing discussion. Thank you all. And it's kind of like that bad joke about, the engineer, the epidemiologist, and the political scientists all show up in a bar. But maybe that's what we need to do, because this was a great conversation, and we need to continue it, because I think we made some real progress tonight. So I just want to thank all of you for being such great partners and the center, and we really look forward to working with all of you. And just to finish up here, we'd love to get everybody involved in this work. So those of you who are listening in, please be part of our work. get involved in the leadership forum, get involved in our strategic initiatives. You've heard a little bit about that work tonight. Help us engage the community to bring that voice that Srila mentioned. Invite your friends to attend our webcasts. And finally, follow us on social media. So thank you all for really a great kickoff to the year. It was a fantastic conversation, and we look forward to working with you and working with all of you in the community. Have a good night, and I guess stay warm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.